All right, I think we're on. Hey, everybody. Welcome into 50 Toast. Thanks for coming back. Got a great guest, Robert Baril, accent on the second syllable, right? On Baril. Am I getting that right?
Okay. You got it.
I've known Rob for a while. It's very good to see you, man. Thanks for being here. We'll do a couple housekeeping things and let everybody get into the show and settle in. We do something here on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Every Tuesday in this space. Facebook Live, Twitter, and eventually goes to YouTube as well. You can share with friends. You can watch it at a different time. You can watch some of it now. You can comment. You can ask questions as well. We'll try to check in and see what's going on. We've got a couple different banners here. We got the 50 Toast banner, and then we've got all of the different places you can find us banner. We'll flip-flop back and forth there. Come join us at All Pro Lines. We're still writing football jokes. You can join in and write some together if you want. Robert, where have you been? You need to come write some football jokes with us. Patreon.com, type in Kostaki and figure out what we're doing over there, and you can help support and join and do all of these kind of things. Next week on 50 Toasts, we're doing a weird one. I'm the guest. We're flipping the script, and a couple of great guys I know, John Riggs and Ron Schultz, are going to interview me. So that was Ron's idea. It felt a little self-indulgent, but I'm like, what the hell? It's all right. You guys have questions for me. I'll answer questions, and then I'll get back to asking questions the following week. Quick Snaps, the podcast continues as well, so come check us out anywhere you get podcasts. It's free. And this gentleman has a great podcast, which is exactly the reason that I wanted to talk to him tonight. It's called Writer's Block, because there were only 100 other podcasts named Writer's Block. And so so I wanted to jump into that pile.
Is succeeding. Yep.
It's honestly great. So anyway, very funny comic from the Minneapolis universe, who's one of the Acme characters that we know and love. I'm very happy to have him in. Robert Baril, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, if we don't mind, let's dive in with the podcast. When did you?
Let's do it.
Why don't you tell people what it is, and then I'll shut up for a sec, and then I'll ask you questions.
Well, it's essentially a joke writing podcast. So it kind of takes the listeners into the green room a little bit, or behind the scenes of how comedy gets made. So Steve Gillespie and myself have comedians on. You were one of our guests, probably one of to this day, still one of the funniest setups we've ever had for the show. And so basically ahead of time, the guest comic will provide Steve and I with some premises that they want work on, whether it's just some tags, some added jokes, or different angles, or want different ways they feel like there's more there, but they're not sure what direction or anything. So then Steve and I'll get together a few times over the phone or whatever and work up some joke ideas, some angles. And then the show is we have the guests come on and they do the setup. And then Steve and I take turns pitching our ideas for jokes. And then we just all kind of riff off of that. And then we move on from premise to premise. And that's the show in a nutshell.
It's great. If you're a comedy nerd, and I know the people who watch this particular thing are, go find this. It's hard to find, but once you find it, it's great. It's a comic's dream. It's like you get to send ideas to some good writers that you've been struggling with. And then you have a deadline, which ended up being great for me, that you're going to be talking to these guys. And I worked on those ideas in between sending them and talking to you guys. And I wrote some of my best stuff for the last several months in that window. And then you guys piled in, and then we had this sort of riff fest about it. It's such a simple, beautiful, great idea, and it's executed well because you guys are good writers.
Well, and Steve Gillespie deserves the credit for that, because it was sort of his baby. He had the idea of getting together on Instagram and just doing some writing sessions on there, because normally we'd watch each other's sets and, oh, I got an idea for you, I got this. And then he moved to Denver, which was better for him pharmaceutically out there. And so but he was like, but it's entertaining. So this could kind of be a show, is us just trying to punch up each other's jokes. And then from there, He talked to the people at Helium. It's on the Helium Podcast Network. And then we just started tapping our contacts. We're both Acme comics, so we can get like the cream of the crop through that. So we wasted no time. We got you. We got Chad Daniels. Jackie Cation was our most recent episode. Todd Glass has been on it. He's going to be a live stream coming up in March again. John Creep, Lachlan Patterson. We're recording Amber Preston tomorrow. So
nice.
Yeah. So it's been so much fun. And it's especially during the pandemic too. It's a great excuse to just get together with some other comics and just kind of chat and make each other laugh again. And then, I mean, at the very least, it's a fun hang, but ideally, our guests will walk away with at least 2 or 3 new jokes they can try or an angle, and, you know, maybe revive an old bit that they'd left for dead a few, months ago.
Right. Yeah, that was what's kind of fun about it. I listened to 2 of them yesterday. I used to listen to so many podcasts. I just don't travel much anymore. And yesterday I had a rare travel day, and it was nice. I listened to Chad Daniels and Tim Harmston, and Harmston was really interesting because there was a little bit of a cheat, but by the end of it, I liked that setup. So I thought it was great that he just sent you a short set. It's a really short one. It's like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of magical in that it has several really good lines in it. And then you guys played it, and then you talked about it and pitched him the jokes that you had come up with.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was like, annoyed is the wrong word, but I go, it's a little bit of a cheat that you just said a bunch of jokes that already work. That's not the premise.
And that was one of our comments too, where it was like, the set sounded great. Like, I don't know what
do you want me to do with this? Yeah.
You want us to add fat? Like, we'll add fat. I feel like it could be the reverse for.
We got fat. We could add. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, I thought the same thing, and as I was listening, it was kind of fun that as it unfolded, you guys had some great ideas, and he was gut laughing at some of them, and I was like, oh yeah, that would be a good way to go with this, and I thought the process was great, and actually, in retrospect, there were 2 chunks that were significantly improved by going through this process with you guys, and one of them was a handful of jokes that I had that I already knew worked. Right. That was the cheat on my episode. I had 3 premises where I had no jokes at all. And I had one where I was like, this joke kills and I want it to be bigger. And I actually think that might be an even more useful process, because then you already have something to hang it on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was cool to hear you guys do that with Harmston in particular.
Well, and that's the kind of fun part too, is that every comic we have on sort of brings their own style and sensibilities, and they might be looking for a different approach. And so in addition to the added benefit of just getting to hang out with these super funny comics and make each other laugh, it's also, I think, making Steve and I better writers, where we're learning to not just write for ourselves, but for people whose wit might be drier or they're more manic on stage, or like, not writing for ourselves, but trying to craft jokes that comics with their own very distinct styles and cadences and deliveries can still use.
Right. That's interesting. That backs me into a question. Who's the most interesting comic in terms of like a stretch writing wise? Who was like style wise different from you or whatever?
Style. Well, one of the first early tests that Steve and I had was our second guest was Dean Edwards, who was on Saturday Night Live.
I know. I did a ship with Dean. We hung out some. Yeah. So it was kind of funny because one of Dean's premises was the Black Little Mermaid. Basically, like, people were losing their mind because the film Little Mermaid was going to be played by a black girl. So then Steve and I, we basically had like 2 lists of jokes. We're like, well, these are the ones that we know are okay, and then these are the ones where we're like, okay, disclaimer: white guys writing some jokes for a black comics premise about a race thing. Oh, that's really interesting.
Hear these. Yeah. So it's like, okay, don't get, I'm just going to throw this out there for what it's worth. Maybe she's upset that her hair's always wet. I don't know. I'm just throwing that one out there.
Right.
Take it, leave it. We can move on if that's not cool. Just sort of.
That's great. I'm already uncomfortable just talking about this.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, we're going to plead the fifth at the start of this one.
That's great because comics have a little bit of an unspoken agreement amongst ourselves that it's okay to joke about anything. And like you and Steve and Dean in a green room somewhere, you could kind of say whatever you want, but you're doing it publicly, which adds another layer of like, is it okay to say this to a black guy to pitch in his act about black people? Like that's another layer of complication.
And that's the funny thing, though, is because a lot of the jokes that we did pitch were jokes he could get away with, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's not like Steve and I are planning on doing these jokes. Like, there's no way in hell we would do them. But like, well, I think they're funny, and it's Dean's joke. We were just trying to help him out.
Right.
So that was one. Let's see, who else? I'm trying to remember. It's kind of, we had Henry Phillips on, who I think is hilarious, but Henry's just so dry that like, that was kind of, I think that was a little bit of a stretch for me, just because I'm more of like a setup punch, machine gun, just like, okay, one liner, whatever. And whereas like Henry's almost more like a stage character, just kind of like a laid back, observational.
Right.
So that was definitely a stretch for me. But for the most part, I mean, I think Steve and I are under no illusions that we're going to be just like handing people 15 minutes of material. But I mean, just like going in, and we also, to his credit too, Steve also introduced trying to get whoever the guest is to talk a little bit about their writing process, and also kind of, how they go about finding the funny, constructing the funny, and like trying to break that down too as well. So
right.
In addition to ideally being entertaining, the show is also kind of informative about the process of joke writing.
Well, let's ask you that, because that's kind of your go-to first question for the guest. What's your process, Robert? How do you write comedy? I want a two-part answer. One for you.
Okay.
And two, is it different when you're doing the work for the podcast?
No, it's actually the same, because it's sort of, Steve and I are a nice combination, because I'm definitely, I'm written out. I write it out. I memorize it. I've gotten a lot better lately over the last few years of like trying to riff on stage and kind of be in the moment. But my specialty is the pre-written stuff, whereas Steve is kind of the opposite, and he's just like the in the moment, feeling the crowd, vibing it out. So like together, we make one great comic. No, we complement each other nicely.
What do you mean great?
For the sake of, but in regards to the show itself, it's basically just an excuse for me to continue to write, because sometimes I try to write no matter what, even if like, is this funny? Is it not funny? Just to write a little bit on a topic or something, and hopefully something will occur to me. And if it doesn't, I toss it, because I'm a padded paper kind of guy. I'm looking over because I have it. Like, you can't see it. I have it with me. I think I just have a pick or something. But yeah. So for the podcast, just having comics run their premises by me, and then I just sit down with a notepad and a pen and just attack it the same way I would one of my own bits. And ideally through that, I'm not only keeping my own joke writing skills sharp, but also kind of honing them and getting them sharper for my own stuff too.
Yeah, that's cool, man. It's such a great process. And you guys have had great guests. I got to go listen to Todd Glass. He's one of my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was insane.
Yeah. He was, oh man, it was, again, like just different, like some comics are just kind of quiet and reserved, and we kind of had to pull it out of them a little bit. And Todd was almost like Steve and I just sat back and tried to hang on for the ride, and then throw some jokes in when we could get them in.
Well, I was sold on doing it when I listened to the one with Brian Miller, because he's a good friend of mine, and you guys had such great chemistry. I mean, it was like watching three great comics just hang out. It was like you kind of went on and off of each other, and it was comfortable and laughy and supportive. And I was like, oh, I love this thing. This is great. Yeah.
I mean, it helps too with like that quick wit style, especially like once, okay, here's the topic. And then whether it's you're on the show or Brian's on the show or whoever, and we start batting stuff around, then it might not even be related to the joke you wanted to work on, but like, oh, here's 3 great one-liners about this topic that I just came up with, and I can, work that in somewhere or whatever. But as far as my process goes, it's from probably college on. Once I developed a Facebook account, I was always, for the most part, just posting jokes. It was just topical, current event jokes, and that was just how I trained my brain. And then eventually it got to be other topics, but it was still, I'd already built up that, mental joke factory there, that I would just switch the topic, but still take it through the same conveyor belt of like, do I add this tag? Here's, switch this around, do a callback, sort of a thing.
Right. Yeah, I do the same thing with football, and then I come back to writing my act, and then I go back to the other thing, and it was great for me to have the deadline of working with you guys. And I had my next deadline was the Nowhere Comedy Club show, and I already been promoting it as a new hour, so I was gonna not do any of the jokes that I did in April. And so I had this like, oh shit, that's a lot of comedy. The good news is, in that format, using notes is perfectly acceptable, because they're literally on the screen right near the camera, and I can kind of talk to them and kind of read and go back and forth. So I didn't have to worry about nailing anything, but I did worry about having a lot of good content. So for me, it was all these different stepping stones to do this show. And now I've got this, I don't know how good it is. I've got an hour's worth of new stuff that when I get back on a stage out in the real world, I'm ready to go, at least as far as doing the writing homework. So it was a great step in the process for me. And I used several of the lines that we actually sat down with I have this giant document of the whole thing. And I sat down with it and listened to the podcast, and I would literally stop it and type lines in and stop it again and play it again and go back and forth. And then I would listen for several beats and then stop and then type some more. And then it all kind of melded into all the other stuff that I was kind of working on. It was great. It was great. I loved it. So thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I might have gotten a line myself out of that. And that's also selfishly kind of something I can take out of it too, is just once we get into a conversation and then it veers off into who knows what, and then it might not be like I'm already developing my own bits anyway. So if, I say something or someone says something that inspires a line in my mind that I can use, I will use that.
Right.
It's a great way to stay in touch with comics you don't get to see anymore, but then also stay productive and develop material. Because I remember when maybe a few months into the pandemic, I remember seeing a few comics online post about how, it's okay if you're not being productive right now, your mental health is important and stuff. And I agree to that to some extent. If you are suffering from crippling depression and all that, okay, you have to take care of your mental health. But I also think if you're somebody that prides themselves on, being a comic, being aware, and then you come out of 2020 and you don't have one new bit.
Right.
Nothing. All the stuff that happened. You don't have anything.
Now you're definitely depressed. Right.
Yeah. But the idea of, and I would hope that the audience members would feel the same way to finally get back into a comedy club. And then you see a comic and he's doing, the same 20 minutes you saw him do last time. What?
It's a totally different world. I know, right?
Especially at stand-ups where you can say whatever you want on stage. There's no censors. There's no whatever.
Right. That's right. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull it off, but I do have the goal as I sit here right now at my mom's house. Makes it easy to dream up the goals out there in the world. I'm going to try to treat it like Louis or Bill Burr taped their hour and that's gone. And I'm just going to start new. I had this crazy forced sabbatical. Today was the first day I sent gig booking emails in a year. So I'm kind of mentally ready to really take a run at doing a new hour and not using the crutch. I don't know if it's going to work, but that's my current plan. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, you're prolific. You have the material to fall back on, but I think I think you can't help but develop once you eventually discard material that works, because it's really easy to just keep falling back on it and falling back on it. And that's
Right.
not to say you go out and just bomb with the new 40. You wouldn't, but like hypothetically, like
It's totally possible.
you just go out there and bomb, and then and then it's like 6 months, and you're like, okay, maybe I should go back to
maybe I'd use a closer that I had that was working in 2019. Maybe that would be good. Now I just got to get the balls to tell the public the story about my fantasy when I was in middle school with the gunman.
I don't think you need balls for that. That's so funny. That's and I think relatable. I think it is relatable because kids have some bizarre fantasies when they're in middle school. I guarantee you at least probably 35-40% of guys in that crowd be like, yep, gunman fantasy, absolutely, yep. You know, with the teacher, maybe it's like the assistant principal or one of the paraprofessionals or something. But armed coercion for the intercourse is probably some sort of factor in that fantasy.
Yeah, take that as a teaser, everybody out there. That's a new chunk we're working on.
But I want to get back into the bit because I just love the psychology of it. Because like they can't be mad at you because you're not the gunman. It's almost like you're a bystander.
People who just are tuning in are like, "What the hell's going on? What are they talking about?" I'll just give you like a 2-sentence explanation. It's a real thing that it was a recurring fantasy that I had when I was in middle school about my English teacher, and I knew that it would be inappropriate for her to mess around with me. So there was a gunman who would force us to have sexual activities, and secretly she loved it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key to the whole operation.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we wrote about this, and I wrote on it before and since. And my wife chimed in with what I think might be the best line of the whole thing was, it's so you to do it that way. Like you could be heroic and save her from a gunman, and that's why she sleeps with you, but you just cut to the chase. No, you have to sleep with me because there's a gun. Like, we don't need to do any of the other hard work.
Because you're still underage though, right? So once the threat of the gun goes away, then it's statutory. Then it's
completely inappropriate.
It's horribly inappropriate. No matter how heroic you are in disarming this grown gunman as a middle schooler, as much as warrant sex for the heroism you've displayed.
Yeah, that's right.
Teacher, it's improper.
I'll pass that on to the wife.
Yeah.
All right. So you touched on something that I wanted to get to as well. Writing jokes in this craziest year ever. You actually did a project that was such a cool concept, so simple and beautiful that I was jealous that I wasn't a part of it. You did an album called 2020 where you and Brian Miller each did 20 minutes about 2020. It's such a simple, beautiful, I love it so much. Tell me about that, because what a bold choice. And how'd you get good enough at the chunks to feel good about recording it all? It seemed like a crazy window.
Part of it was just kind of viewing it as an exercise and just kind of like, okay, we both know we're not going to make the greatest comedy album of all time, but also not a lot of albums were probably going to be coming out at the tail end of last year. I think it came out January 1st, but so it started with Brian and Nate Abshire won the Coast to Coast roast that the Helium Club on.
Love that.
Yeah. And so they each got like an album deal. And then Brian and I got to talking because I thought like 2020, it'd be kind of cool because Brian and I both have similar styles. We're very ripped from the headlines, topical comics, which on the one hand, it's great at making you a good joke writer because you're doing it nonstop. I would say even on a slow day, I'm probably writing for at least a half hour, just what's something that's happening or trying to, and a lot of the times it doesn't come out to anything. Sometimes I can get a lot out of it, depending on. But the sad part is that a lot of times, you could write a killer one-liner about a current event, but in 2 weeks, no one remembers it. And so a lot of the time it's not really worth trying to record if, the punchline's Anthony Scaramucci. Like, you hear a Scaramucci joke now, and 85% of people are like, who the hell, what?
Yeah.
But we felt that 2020 was different because it was, the most insane year ever. You have the pandemic, you have the election, you have the racial unrest, you had all this stuff. And so it was unlikely that the events of that year would be quick to escape people's minds. And so the idea of him and I teaming up and using the rip from the headline style for everything in this unbelievably messed up year, it kind of lends itself to it, and we wouldn't have to worry about the shelf life issue. And then, I mean, it also kind of becomes like a nice little commemorative keepsake or something where like maybe 2022, 2023, people are ready to move on or not, but like everyone will remember that year and it's called 2020 and like, oh yeah, that was messed up. I can listen to some jokes about that. Hopefully.
Right. Yeah, it's great. I love that. I remember being really prolific in 2001 when the 9/11 thing and my dad died. Like, it was a crazy year for me. I wish I had a keepsake. I wish I had like my best 15 minutes from that year somewhere recorded. That'd be really cool to look back on.
Well, and I also felt like I was at a time too where I was really coming into my own with writing and stuff, because a few weeks prior I had done Crash and Burn at Acme with Tim Slagle, where I wrote a bunch of stuff and we watched each other's sets, gave each other tags.
Right.
Through that alone, I came up with another 20, 25 minutes, however long the sets were, of material. And so from that, I plucked a good chunk of it for the album. And we got to co-headline at Acme. So we each did like 45 minutes. And since we only had to contribute 20-ish minutes of the album, it was just half of a set from both of us.
Right.
So it was nice to just throw all the jokes out that we could, cut out the best ones, the ones that worked, and then that's the album. And then we just don't tell those again. Or every once in a while, if we're in the mood, we can. There's no law. Sure. And the leftovers can be where the next album, the next chunk of material comes from. And, if I listen to it like, oh, I could have put a tag there. Oh, but then it gets to the keepsake thing. But like, it's just like a fun little thing to have for that time.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Where can people get it?
That's a good question. I would assume iTunes, like Spotify, Pandora, all the places you can get
the places you get stuff.
The places you get albums. I'll be, if anyone's watching this in Minneapolis, I'll be at Acme all this week, and I'll have hard copies after the show if you drive a 2010 Buick LeSabre like I do, and you can just pop it in the CD player.
Oh man, CDs, they are going away. Oh man, I don't want them to go away because they have helped me pay for flights for the last 15 years.
Do you think they'll come back? Like everything comes around again. Like Nazism's popular again. I feel like if Nazism can come back, CDs should have like at least a few months of renaissance before too long.
I just did a thing with Augie Smith and he was ranting. He does the show from his backyard. He was ranting and pointing at the garage. He goes, there are 3,000 copies of me telling jokes and that no one's ever going to buy them. It's over. Such a funny point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sell those quick. I've got some sitting around. I'm like, oh boy, is the next thing going to be viable? Will people spend $7 to buy a
vinyl? Did you say
to buy a greeting card from me that has a code on it or whatever the next thing is?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought about the codes, but I've worked with Gillespie many times, and I'll open for him. And I remember, where were we? It might have been Indianapolis. It might have been Morty's actually. He had these download cards, and no one knew what to do with them. Like some people just took them, some took them and like threw them on the floor. Like it's not, at least with the CD. You know what it is. Like, it's not like this weird business card with letters and numbers on it. Like, a computer had an aneurysm and it's just like, what is?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Even to this day, I was at House of Comedy last week for a few shows and I managed to sell a fair amount after each one. And I think a lot of people just want to support the performer.
That's the thing. It's such a nice moment to like shake the hand and like support the comic and do the thing. I love it. And I miss all that stuff. I miss being out there. So tell me, because I haven't done much. What's pandemic comedy like? How's it treated you the last few months?
Pretty good. I mean, I'm fortunate enough where my father is somewhat vulnerable. He had quadruple bypass like 7 or 8 years ago. and he's in his 60s now, but he's up in Warroad, Minnesota, where it's probably 1,000 below. It's the day after tomorrow up there right now, I think. He has to ride a wolf to work. It's when he goes. Yeah, so I'm not really worried about infecting anyone that could be susceptible, or it would be, close to fatal if they got it. So I don't do any open mics at clubs where there's, a lot of open mic comics who I feel like aren't taking it very seriously. Whereas the shows themselves, especially at places like Acme, House of Comedy, they're taking it seriously. I don't mind doing it. And the crowds are great. I think they're just ready to laugh. They're ready to get back out again. They're ready to grasp some semblance of normalcy. And
Right.
I'm doing a lot of topical stuff, and they seem to enjoy it too. I think I feel like there's probably two schools to comedy. There's the people that go that want to escape, and then there's the people that go because they want to, laugh at the stuff that on its face might not be funny, or laugh at the problems that are going on. They want to go and laugh at the issues and not be distracted from them. And so I do a little bit of both, but I think my specialty is, making fun of all the horrible stuff that is going on. And yeah, I mean, I think they're great.
That's cool to hear. Is it a little bit like, this is just me projecting what I know onto this situation. I feel like if you do a tiny town or you go to Alaska, there's a little bit of, we're so glad you're here. Is there a little extra bump of like, hey, we're doing this, even though things are fucking weird right now? Is it a little bit of that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely, they're down to have a good time. And then the only worry is like the few people that seem like they're not taking it seriously at all. And then it's like, well, okay, you need to keep your distance a little bit. I'm glad you could go, but let's not, we're not gonna, spit on each other or anything. Like you've been drinking a lot and you seem contagious. You probably don't have it, but I'm not going to take that risk.
We got some people chiming in here. Washington, watching from Deer Creek, Illinois. Oh, I don't even know where that is. Where's Deer Creek, Maureen? I've crisscrossed Illinois for decades. I've never run into Deer Creek. Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I've done. Welcome, Greg. Bardstown, Kentucky. That's right around the corner from the Caravan. I sent them an email today. Maybe I'll come back and tell some jokes there. All right. Well, cool, man. All right. Tell me about your, let's put this. This is a good segue. We'll do it this way. We'll show the, on Twitter. On Twitter, you are Robert Baril 2. Mm-hmm. And on Instagram, you are Instagrampa Comedy. Tell me about your wacky life, my friend.
Yeah. I am a step grandpa, or will be when we finally get married here in May. That was something that was thrown off by the virus. So we're going to get married. We're going to do a very small ceremony. I barely got in.
That's small.
Yeah. But we'll have a link that we send to the closest friends and family that we consider. We're actually going to do an OnlyFams. So it's family that contribute to the wedding, and they get to see some bonus content of the wedding. The more, yeah,
that's funny. These are good jokes, Robert.
Huh?
These are good jokes.
Oh, thank you.
I thought my wedding was tiny. It was me, my wife, my mother-in-law, and 2 photographers. There were only 3 participants. My wife's a professional photographer, so we had a photographer for one part, and then we had a friend of hers come and take some pictures when we were like running around later. So that was a small wedding. That's a very small wedding. And her mom was a last-second addition. So, but let's get back to you. This is
she wasn't. She didn't make the original list.
No, actually, she didn't. And in fact, we hesitated to invite her because we didn't want my mom to feel obligated to come, who was dealing with my brother, who was in this had a really bad health situation at the time, which is part of the reason we didn't have a big wedding. We were like, someday we'll have a big party for everybody, but this is a weird year. This wasn't this year, but several years back. But anyway, that's why part of the reason we had a small wedding. At the last minute,
blowback from that, or were they okay with it?
Nah, everyone was cool with it because we're grown-ups. It's like we weren't kids, and depending on how you define these things, there was the second wedding for both of us. I wasn't really married the first time, but for all intents and purposes, it wasn't like we were kids and it was the first thing and, whatever. And from a practical point of view, we wanted to be parents with each other, and so we didn't want to kick that down the road because we were already old, Robert. Anyway, that's too much about me. This should be on next week's episode. This isn't about me.
I was about to say, I think it's funny. Who performed the ceremony? Did you have a judge or a pastor? Or?
We had a wackadoo guy who was willing to do weird stuff, and we got married at the Met in New York City. So
Oh, cool.
You're not supposed to get married in the Met. So we kind of talked about it and made a plan, and we got like a 50s style taxi cab to drive us around. We did all these cool pictures, and we snuck into the Met and got married and took all these cool pictures. And
nice.
Yeah, it was actually a really fun. It wasn't, I wouldn't have drawn it up this way, but it was my wife's dream to have this wackadoo thing. And it was really cool. It was actually a really nice way to do it.
There was this guy that, I don't know how I wound up getting this gig, if it was Craigslist or something, but there was this guy, he got married outside, I think it was St. Paul or Minneapolis. I got such a terrible memory. It was somewhere in the Twin Cities. It was outside one of the government buildings, but he gave me, I think it was $50 to pretend to be John Cusack from Say Anything, which was his lady's favorite movie. So like I had like because I kind of look like him. So I had like the tan jacket and the music box and stuff, and was playing the song when she came out.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Like maybe the whole comedy thing doesn't work out. I could do some stunt work for Cusack, and maybe try to parlay that wedding thing into a viable career.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure that's a big demand, Robert. That's
probably. Well, I mean, I would imagine his biggest fans are probably on their second or third marriage.
That's true. Third or fourth, fifth.
Yeah.
So you didn't have kids.
Nope.
And for how many years have you been with this lovely lady of yours?
Almost 5.
Okay. Because when I worked with you, these were newish jokes about this new world that you were in. It's been a few years. And now you're getting married, and you skipped having kids, but you're a grandfather. That's fascinating.
Oh yeah. No, I did one of the my second album, TMI, I have a lot of jokes about it. And what I like to say is a lot of people start their own family, and I got mine used. Pretty good deal. Bit of a fixer-upper. But yeah, it was nice. Because I was never very much of a family guy in my life. And then she and I just hit it off, and I fell in love. And then I went from I was close with my parents, but extended family, I wasn't involved in a lot of the get-togethers at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. And then I went from not really spending a lot of time with family to having the most family. Now they're everywhere.
But have you ever do you even know of anybody else in the whole world who has this situation? It's unheard of. You're like your own category, right?
I know. My buddy Khalid likes to refer to it as it's almost like the millennial Everybody Loves Raymond, just that kind of sort of it doesn't. Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone else that has the situation of coming in as the patriarch to a plan that's not his.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I was perusing around looking at stuff that you had done earlier today to kind of get ready for talking to you. And there was some job, won't do it justice, but it was some version of, I'm a millennial. So, we buy stuff that other people have already created on the internet. Some version of that.
Yeah. Because my grandma, what was it? I told my mom I'm dating a grandma, and she said, that's not what I meant when I said I wanted grandchildren.
Right.
Mom, I'm a millennial. We don't make things anymore. We acquire them through the internet. Yeah.
See, that's way better wording. Apologies.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. That joke's on sex and politics. That's the first one that I did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. So you
Yeah.
have the 2 albums, 2 full regular albums, and then the 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. I got 2 solo and then the 2020 with Brian. Yeah. If you check me out on wherever, Pandora, Spotify, all that stuff, you can get all those.
That's cool. So how did mom react? So mom didn't get genetic old fashioned through you in her mind's eye grandchildren. But she's got great grandchildren.
Yeah.
Great.
She's
It's such an
not a
interesting
big fan of the
situation.
great grandma title.
That's hard to sell.
Yeah. 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 She can be Mama Baril or Grandma Baril. The great grandma, she's not. My dad just is all about it. He's like, yep, like, call me whatever. Like, that's my mom was like, we can just keep it at maybe Grandma or Mrs. Baril, or kind of like she's a substitute
You're so
teacher.
young. She must be like crazy young to be a great grandmother. It's funny, right?
Yeah. Well, like, I almost feel like I should just have like a link to like 4 or 5 tracks that I could play for fielding some of these. But yeah, she's only about 10 years older than I am. The joke I like to say is that the only difference is that she was a lot more popular than I was in high school, and then had a daughter that was a lot more popular than I was in high school. And here we are.
And here we are.
And here we are. Yep. It's nice though, because like I love the grandkids. I get a kick out of them, but then it's nice because I'm, it's not I'm the grandpa. It's not my responsibility. I'll babysit for a little bit, but then, hey, this is your kid.
It's
here.
so nice. It's like you took Uncle Dad and put it on steroids. Like it's like, yeah, it's a little, in some ways it's like the bachelor's dream come true of like, oh, I want all the trappings, but I don't want to raise a child. I don't want to cut grapes in half and keep somebody from falling down the stairs. That's a pain in the ass. Right.
Yeah, I literally skipped over like 30 years of life thanks to Tinder. Like I jumped the line.
40.
Some men it takes
50 years for some people. Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's so funny. And I'm at the other end of the whole scene. Like I'm a late father. Like I'll be lucky to even sniff grandfatherhood, So tell us what you're drinking. I heard some version of this as we were jumping on the air here.
Called Screwball. This is a peanut butter whiskey. And this was brought to my attention courtesy of Gabe Noah at NBC Studios, where we do the live streams of our Writer's Block podcast, Steve and I. The next one of which, thank you for bringing it up, me, is just to make, because I'm notoriously bad at plugs. I'll be done with whatever I'm doing, and then I'm like, I didn't mention any of that. March 1st on our Writer's Block Facebook page, Todd Glass will be the guest. He'll be live from where he's at, and we'll be going over his premises. You can check that out on our Facebook page. Except I don't know if we have the handles on that, but it's kind of funny because you mentioned how there's several writer's blocks. So the only handle we're able to get is at writers. We got that. We got all those letters. But for block, we were only able to get BLCK. So it could also be writer's black. So I wonder how many people have mistakenly clicked on it thinking it was going to be like, I don't know, Maya Angelou focus group or James Baldwin, Ralph Ellison tribute.
I started to put those on here, but they're different between Twitter and Instagram. And I was like, I'll send the people to find Robert, and then you can get it from there.
I share all that stuff anyway.
That's right. Robert Baril too. It seems like you're the sequel. Like, I was pissed when I couldn't get at Kostaki on Twitter. There's some dude named Konstantinos. He has at Kostaki, like the dream Twitter handle, and he's never posted, and he's had it for like 10 years, and he has 3 followers, and I'm one of them.
When was that one created? Do you know?
It was right at the beginning, whatever, 2009, whatever the beginning of the. It was probably
like a spite thing. Like if someone had a feeling you were going to do it, and they're like, "I'm taking at Kostaki."
No, it's clearly a Greek. Like his real name is Constantine something. And so it's probably an old dude whose son was like, "Hey, you should get Kostaki before it's too late." And then he forgot about, like, he's never been active at all. He doesn't follow anyone. He doesn't have any followers. He's never posted. He's just sitting on my perfect.
Well, probably for the best, though. I mean, you wouldn't want somebody with at Kostaki if he's like sharing Nazi propaganda or like, drawings of
lining, Robert.
Bad children or something. And then when they search you, that's the first thing that pops up is this Kostaki. And then they're like, he was so funny. He seems so sweet. And it's swastikas and
stick to the football jokes, Kostaki. Once you do politics, nobody likes it. Have you gotten that in your life? Are you getting that? Stick to the jokes. What?
Say that again.
Do you get any of that stick to the jokes kind of attitude from people? I've gotten it several times this summer, and I was really,
if I did, it was years ago. Cause like anyone that knows me knows I really lead into the topical and political. And so, right. I mean, I would imagine they've just stopped following me if they don't, if they're not into it. Like it's so much of who I am and what I do that it really doesn't, it's like, no, that really wouldn't work. I was trying to be like, oh, that's like telling Jimmy Page to stick to the solos, but he does do the solos. So I don't know if that didn't.
Yeah. Augie had a great response to somebody who was like, they were complaining about some joke. He's like, you told me to stick to the jokes. Like, look, you might not like these, but this is what you told me to stick to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, I try to take angles and positions on the material where, it's pretty clear where I fall politically, I think, a lot of the time. Although that is also why when I perform, I do try to have some facial hair, because if I'm completely clean shaven and I have a short haircut, I look pretty alt-righty. So I do try to have like a fashionable 5 o'clock shadow, have my hair a little bit longer, and look vaguely ethnic. And then that way it's more ambiguous. And then the positions I take it's more trying to find a way to ridicule stuff through a lens that isn't necessarily partisan. And then I can get more people on board with me through that.
Right. That's
like
right.
I've been developing a bit on the rioting at the Capitol, for instance. And the joke is how the ratings were so great for what happened at the Capitol that networks are trying to capitalize now. And Fox is getting in on the game with a new reality competition show called The Masked Rioter, where they have washed up celebrities dress up and try to commit treason and murder prominent Democrats. And then we have to guess who is doing it. It's like a big act out of like a dinosaur, trying to stab Nancy Pelosi. He's like, oh, it's Meatloaf, rock legend Meatloaf. Oh my God, this is a treat. Not for Nancy, obviously, but the rest of us. I think he can run like
that. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's great to talk to you, man.
Yeah, right back at you. This is great. This is a great idea.
It's so simple. It's just an excuse for me to talk to 50 friends over the course of a year. And I did it in real life with lunch prior to this. Jimmy Pardo was my first cancellation at the beginning of the pandemic. We had kind of been chasing around trying to nail down a date forever. And we had one in mid-March. And I told my wife I was going to lunch, and she goes, "You're going to what?" And so I was trying to decide whether or not to go. And Jimmy calls me and goes, "I'm not coming." And he was nice enough to do the cyber version of this 50 Toasts a couple of months ago. And it's been great to just talk to buddies and friends and even talk to people that I didn't know very well, who I liked. And, it's been cool. It's been a nice way to stay connected to the world in such weird times. So are we coming out of these weird times? Are we going to, I was doing some math with my brother and feel like
I have no idea. I'm just trying to mine it for as much material as it's worth, because that's sort of therapy for me too. Is I just feel like if I can find a way to make it funny, I can process it, and hopefully maybe a few other people can too.
Right.
I mean, it seems like Biden's taking it a lot more seriously, which I appreciate. And he's not tweeting every day. And you just see videos of him like enjoying time with his family. And like, you're like, oh, it's a human being again. Like that's nice. And I also joke a lot about Biden too in my act, but I don't know. I mean, there's no shortage of news stories coming out. And so I try not to. Big picture, I have no control over. But like day by day when stuff comes out, like, okay, can I make this funny? Can I develop this into something? Does that have any legs? And I kind of just focus my energy on that because that's really the only thing I have any sort of control over. And then just trying to get more gigs and, you know, build a career out of this.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, I did a little math with my brother sort of casually, like there's tens of thousands of people, not thousands, tens of millions of people who have had COVID. And now there are tens of millions who have gotten the vaccine. And those vaccines are continuing to roll out. People are still getting COVID. So there's, at some point, we're going to get to a place where it's like, oh, well, now I don't feel weird about getting on a plane and going and tell some jokes, you know?
Yeah, ideally. And then hopefully by that point, I think I feel bad for the comics that are just coming up or have only been doing it 3 years or whatever, because they're going to be set back. I mean, once everything opens up again, it's still going to be another 2 or 3 years before they can get any serious reps and then get back where they were to kind of get back on that upward trajectory. Because once stuff opens back up, especially on the coast, it's going to be the biggest names that want the best because they've been dormant they've been hibernating for the last 2 years. So once those spots open back up, it's not going to be the up and comers that get them.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And I've talked to people kind of in both camps. Some of my characters around me think it's going to be wild and crazy and 80s like, where people are so happy to be out. They're going to go out and go bananas for a few months. Mm-hmm. And then the other side is a little bit like, yeah, but the economy is also broken. People have been under and unemployed, and now we're all scared of each other. And it's going to take a while to kind of be okay. Even once it's scientifically okay, we're not going to be okay mentally for a while. I could kind of see either one of those happening.
Yeah. I mean, or a combination of the two. I mean, you'll probably have some people where it's almost like they had the old Vietnamese guys that didn't know the war was over, that still like just waiting to, stab a white guy. And then you might have some people where, I mean, once the vaccines are readily available and it's all clear, are still just, nope, it's still out there. I heard from, Gene across the street, his kids, nephews, sons, whatever, died of the virus. Just, not taking it. And not taking.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I feel a little scarred about it. Like it's, even simple things like my wife and I went out for Valentine's Day. First time in forever we went anywhere, and we ate outside, but there was a few beats of me going into the foyer of a restaurant with my mask on to get signed up for the outside table. And I was like, it's, and I recognize rationally that's probably not any real genuine threat to anything, but I've just been avoiding that for so long in a row that now it's a part of, it's crazy how it gets to your head.
I've really been tempted to steal in public because you're already wearing the mask. It's almost like, and never for me like mom and pop shop or anything, but if it's like a big corporate chain or something like that, and I got the mask on, it's almost like, I'm going to live a little, I think, this comes on you, Walmart, or, wherever I am, but just kind of like, all right, I'm going to get my kick somehow.
You've got enough of a bump from the centralization of power this 2020 has brought to you as the big guy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm already wearing
at $600. I am taking this magazine.
You're putting down that peanut butter whiskey, my friend.
It is good. It is.
I'm gonna have to try that. I never even heard of that.
Very long. This is 10 minutes ago I started. That's not true.
It's a school night. You gotta tell jokes at Acme tomorrow.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got all day to sleep before that.
If anyone's in the Minneapolis area, go check out Robert Baril at Acme this weekend. One of the great clubs.
Yeah.
It's just a gift to comics, this club, and it's still around, and they've been losing money to stay alive and be great to comics this whole crazy year. Go support Acme. And check it out. If you can see a Zoom show, you can watch this from wherever you are. Check out Robert's album 2020 with our boy. Many of you guys know our boy, Brian Miller. Check out Writer's Block. Check out Patreon. Type in Kostaki. Check out All Pro Lines, football jokes. Come write some football jokes with us, Robert. Yeah, it's good fun. You're a Vikings fan, right?
Over?
What's that?
I said, can I still do it when the season's over, or is it?
Yeah, it's going to be less because during the season it's like really intense and Sundays are insane and I'm writing like crazy. We don't have that, but there's a good 25 jokes in there since the season ended, and we're always doing memes and playing around. And this year, I might just be biased because it's good for me professionally, but I think this will be the busiest NFL offseason as far as news. There's about 25 quarterbacks. We don't know where they're going to play. It's so weird how many there are. We're going to get a Deshaun Watson trade, a Carson Wentz trade. J.J. Watt's going to sign with somebody. There's a lot of interesting news.
As long as Kirk Cousins stays put.
That's what you want? That's what you care the most about?
As long as Kirk... Comedically, yes. It's the same approach that I have towards the pandemic. I have no control over it. So I just try to make
Is this the third year of the 3 years guaranteed coming up? He's done 2, right?
I think so. Don't hold me to that. I believe
you don't have a choice. You have to keep him. You're going to pay all the money anyway. You have to keep him this year.
Yeah.
Right? Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, I have no idea. I
didn't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't want to get it wrong for the listeners.
I'm not terribly. I think they signed him to a 40-year contract, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Ron Milford is saying yes. He's following along here. He says yes to this is the last year for. That's okay. He's fine. He's the 19th best quarterback in the world right now.
I had a joke that didn't make it onto 2020 about Kirk Cousins, where he wasn't taking the virus seriously, but that's just because he was jealous of how much better the virus is at spotting an open receiver.
Nice. That's a good joke.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, see, when you write a joke like that, at least tag All Pro Lines on Twitter, and then we'll retweet.
You got it. I will.
Or you can send it directly. Absolutely. Either way, we could do it both ways.
You got it.
I could post it on All Pro Lines, tag you, then you retweet it. Either one of these, we can do this.
Going forward, I'm 100% in, man.
All right, great to have you, man. Thanks so much for talking to me. It's great to hang. I'm definitely going to drink some peanut butter whiskey at some point in my life.
Do it up.
Robert Baril, everybody, check him out. We'll throw the banners with the thing. These are all the places you can find Robert. Check out the Writer's Block podcast. He's got great comics on there. It's such a cool thing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take it easy. We'll see you again. Good night.